Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode, we are leaving all of the algorithm-friendly, current event, smart topic fodder. All of that's behind us, because today we are purely going to talk about a narrative event that we ran for our friends. A very niche topic. And give a rundown of how we came to come up with the event, what we did, how it went, and what we might do next, and maybe some advice on if you want to try to run your own narrative stuff for your own gaming groups. And
to be honest, you should. Like we don't have a whole segment here for telling you why you should, but you should. You should think about doing it. It adds way more stakes, and it's way more fun.
And also, sometimes less stressful, but not this time around, because other stuff. But the narrative stuff was good. It was the stuff around it that was, a lot.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. But first, we got to talk about hobby time and games played. Okay, John, what have you been up to?
Well, I played a bunch of games at this narrative event that we ran and we're going to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about those games.
I acknowledge it's a little superfluous this particular week.
Yes, but other than that, I prepped some Song of Ice and Fire Greyjoys stuff to try that out again. I reorganized and pulled out all of my Gene Stealer cult because the new Codex is coming soon, and for reasons we'll find out about our narrative game, I'm going to be playing Gene Stealer cult in our next narrative game.
Spoilers.
Woo! And then, on top of all of that, I have been working on my Tauntor, because I signed up to go to a Conquest tournament in July. So I need to try to get all of my models built and painted. Most of them are built. I just really need to start finishing on painting all of them. And then once they're all painted, I'll be ready to go for my July tournament of Conquest.
I think you're going to have fun at that tournament, or at least I hope everyone does.
I'm going to try.
I mean, do or do not, there is no try.
We'll see. Who knows? Maybe I'll have a horrible time. I'll just get slapped around the entire time. Question whether I even like playing Conquest.
I hope that's not that bad. It's 4 games in a day, which is going to be a little rough. I won't lie to you. I'm hoping it's not question your hobby bad.
I am going to go ahead and get myself a camel pack and some protein bars so that I never have to leave a table. So I can just sit there.
Poor move, Chief. Poor move. Try again.
I'm going to fill the camel pack full of, vodka. It'll be a great time.
What are you trying to do? Die?
Lose. What about you? What have you been doing?
For me, it was a lot of prep for this narrative event, if I'm being honest.
Same.
It was just, I was hobbying, and I got the last bit of terrain painting done at 3:23 Friday afternoon, and then jumped to, doing all the laundry and putting all of it away before people arrived at my house at, 4:30. So, it came down to the wire before the narrative event, with all of the hobby, and now I'm working on doing all the wrap-up stuff. So, I am taking the events of the weekend and the story that we all wrote together, and I am, John is going to do the high-level wrap-up of, narrator's perspective in the war. That sort of write-up. I am going to take some moments that I think are really narratively impactful or cool or fun, and I'm going to write them as, little novella-style things, sort of like a novel, with characters and the whole 9 yards. To just show off some of those key turning point moments for the group. I am so far, according to on my computer screen, 8 pages long. On my phone, it feels like I am unrolling a papyrus scroll every time I try to look at what I'm writing, and I am only 2/3 done with the first part. It's an endeavor. I hope it's at least fun for everyone. But a lot of writing time.
It's fun for you. You're enjoying this writing. You can't lie to anybody.
Yes, I am enjoying. It's just there are times I go, you're going to write this and 3 people will read it. But I like those 3 people, so I'm going to keep writing it.
If I read it 3 times, does that count as like 9 people?
I don't think that's how it works. I don't.
Damn.
Good try, though.
That's how Facebook, that's how YouTube views work.
Yeah, and comments.
Thank you, you 10 people that watch us.
Really putting in the work to let it run in the background on repeat. Yeah, it's been a lot of work afterwards because I want to give everyone a good narrative time. I want them to feel the narrative bug, and I want to give them moments where they feel special because their cool army and the cool stuff they did gets to, for just like 15 pages, feel like they're in a novel, that they get their time in the sun. Like, I want that for them, and I think for some of these stories, they deserve it. So, like, it's a big lift, but I want to try. And hopefully, maybe it'll kind of, like, open the door for other people to want to take some swings, too, if I take some swings. Outside of that, I've also been doing some show prep. So I've been also getting my Song of Ice and Fire stuff together so we could try with the new cards and stuff that are available. We just talked about in the previous episode. To dive back into a Song of Ice and Fire to see how it is now compared to when we ended our break. Well, started our break from the game. And also
See what parts are cold, which parts are hot. You know, fire, ice.
Songs of Fire and Ice.
The White Walkers.
They're coming from the north, but too bad they're not in the game, because apparently George said there's not enough there for a faction, but he's wrong.
I digress.
I disagree firmly.
Ice spiders would be sick, George.
If you gave me a weekend and a case of garage beer, I would come out with an army on the other side, okay? That's all I'm saying. I could make a White Walker army. It could happen. The NCU board would be the biggest challenge, but even that isn't entirely insurmountable.
I mean, the mechanic's really simple. They freeze NCU board slots instead of using them.
Or they do really weird, like, group slug replacers, where, like, some can lock out entirely, others can, like, corrupt it, and you can't get the good effect, then it's a bad effect. Like, this is not undoable. I digress. And then from the comments, Sony Black, I just wanted to make sure I had the right username. So, like, Sony Black is a person who has been really helpful in, like, putting very helpful suggestions in the comments of the YouTube videos. And one of the games that they mentioned was Malifaux, which I actually have a starter box for. I went to Gen Con pre-pandemic, and the first and second Gen Con I went to, I demoed Malifaux, and we had so much fun. We demoed it a second time. And I bought myself, like, a little starter box gang of Papaw Hogs, like Papaw Hog Ulix. He's just the Hog Lord. He's an old Papaw who wants to be left alone to make big pigs, and I respect it.
Big Pig.
I'm here for Big Pig. And I really enjoyed Malifaux. I thought it was really fun, but I couldn't find anyone to play it locally. But if people want a potential episode on Malifaux to kind of, like, talk about pros and cons like we do with some of the other games, I want to try to pull everything out and play some games to kind of, like, get up to speed and see if maybe we could put out an episode on Malifaux. So I've got all my Malifaux stuff out. I was looking through some of the rules changes, putting it into a list builder, which they now have. It's like a list builder app, which is quite good, actually. And also free. That's not loaded.
The best sort of rules app.
Free and functional. So I'm doing a little bit of prep there. And one of our editors, Seth, also has a starter box of Malifaux, but similarly didn't have anyone to play it with. So we can at least do some demo games. Well, I already did demo games. We'll do some games against each other. It's like 30 points or whatever our games amount to. But I want to try to do a little prep for that. And then outside of that, again, prepping for maybe another episode later, read my way through almost the entire book of Death Wizards from Snarling Badger.
I also read that this week.
Did you now? I'm shocked. I'm awed.
Yeah, I've also ordered it. It'll be here relatively soon.
My shock. My awe.
We're gonna totally not play it. It'll be totally not a thing we cover on the show. What do you know? Yeah, we're gonna cover Death Wizards later. Also, like, shout out, if you didn't hear the news, like, I'm an old Warhammer Hordes guy. Like, I played Warhammer Hordes in, like, 2010, 2011.
You ancient papaw.
2013, 2014, whole 9 yards, right before it exploded into nothing. Just got bought up by the people who make like Guild Ball and stuff. And if you don't know, the people who make Guild Ball and stuff used to play the game and loved the game, and that's what really sort of got them into wargaming. And they have purchased it, and so things might be changing because Privateer Press is no longer going to be the sole controller of Warmahordes. And so we'll see what happens with that, because I'd love to dive back into that if it's, good and not a mess.
Yeah, I was always told that by the time I got into wargaming, that game was just a cluster, and just riddled with a number of problems, both from like the model side and the game side. So, just sort of on its last leg, and then it teetered not too long after I really started wargaming.
Yeah, a slight pitch for it, for those who don't know, is that you basically play a leader. You have like a hero character who can then take war machines or war beasts, depending on what faction you have, and that you burn order tokens to activate those and have those do actions and attack stuff, and they have their own sheets with like health numbers and stuff. So it's sort of like having slightly bigger models fight each other, and so it's a lot lower model count game, where instead of individual models being less than units are much more rare. So you might have 1 or 2 units of like 5 to 10 dudes in your entire army. And then the rest of it is like, I brought 4 war machines and like 5 dudes. It's in a squadron and a single leader. And that's my 2,000 point army.
Mm-hmm. I was told I would apparently like Troll Bloods, but...
maybe.
I don't know enough to be able to qualify that.
I think you would just like the game because it's lower model count and it's much more about like cool plays with big punchy monsters essentially, and not like very finicky micro strategy. Mm-hmm. It's very much like, how are we going to haul or brawl over these 4 objectives?
Yeah. It's just one of those things that like I got in way too late, so I have no good memories or nostalgia for it. But, if they make, as you said before show, like, if they make big boy moves, I'm willing to consider. But that's going to be a hard task to revive that game from the dead. I hope they pull it off. I
do too.
More options in the market is good. I don't want to poo-poo it. It's just, it's going to be hard. Well, I guess we'll look back in like a year, see how they're doing.
Oh no, we have more games to talk about on their fun Talk About Game show.
What a shame! Yeah, more option, more gooder for everyone. And yeah, now I'm also prepping for the next HammerCon. I am
same.
Because of the events of the narrative, I'm going to be stepping into a different faction next time around. So I'm preparing big, large robots. It's a time.
I must do robots with 4-armed weirdos.
I don't know if that might be true or might not. Let's talk about it. Okay, John, narrative. HammerCon. It was supposed to be the second HammerCon of 2024. It ended up being the first HammerCon of 2024 because of COVID.
First one got ruined.
I painted my first ever full 2,000 point Age of Sigmar army and got frickin' COVID 2 or 3 days before it was
2 days before
happen.
the event. And it was at your house. Like, there was no time to reschedule into a different location or anything else. So, like, we just...
Both myself... I caught my COVID from my wife, Typhoid Mary. And now, HammerCon 1 was ruined. So, this is the first HammerCon of 2024. Ruined. What a time. We did a couple of things different this time. The first of which is we actually hosted it at our local game store. They were gracious enough to let us rent out space at a very reasonable rate. So we went ahead and did that so we could have more tables to invite people. But we also brought our own custom terrain from home to try to flesh out some of this setting we're building. But I guess if we're going to do the full rundown, we're going to start with John. Who are our players? Who are the Dramatis Personae? I think that's how it's pronounced. But tell me the list of players in this game. Who are our characters?
So,
the movers and the shakers. Our heels and heroes.
The players are swapped between 2 sides really. And within that there's sub factions. So you had the defenders, like people that were defending things or like trying to like work together. And that was 2 Tau players and 2 Sisters players and 1 Imperial Guard players called the Chemfems, which are effectively mercenaries.
They were kit bashed entirely out of necromunda minis. It was freaking dope.
Yep. There's an entire army of Escher like models.
So cool.
Yeah. And then you had the aggressors, so ones that were either trying to destroy stuff or take stuff, or were like already on a world and were like making it terrible for people who lived there. And needed to be cleansed. And so things like orcs, or one of them, world eaters, Drakari, Death Guard, and Necrons, right? And so what ended up happening for a lot of this was that you would have the 2 Tau players would like calculate their points up together to determine their narrative, and the Sisters players would calculate their points together and determine their narrative, and then the mercenary would decide who he was going to back after his games, while the aggressors were trying to fuck it all up, just like really wreck stuff.
Be spoilers, really, truly.
And they all had their own like small little things they're trying to work towards or do, like each of the factions.
Yeah, that was sort of our setup. We wanted to go in with a pretty simple starting structure so we didn't overwhelm everybody. And we wanted them to have enough freedom to be able to tell their story. So we sort of pivoted into a simple base structure and instead went a little more ham on the actual worlds and the setting. Because if we want to tell our own non-canon stories, we thought it would be best to make our own system that is entirely homebrewed, that we have called the Veskol system, and then fill it with planets that we wrote collectively as a group, and then gave a little character to, a little fluff to, some ideas on who's holding it and why, so that we can then fight over those. Currently, we have 5 pre-named planets that we're working with. We got Belladonna 7, Bernar, Hephaestus 7, no, that's Hephaestus 12, Orphib's Fall, and Oservros? Yes. God, that's a weird spelling of that. Huh. And those are the named planets that we have so far. The others will pop up in time. And those were the ones that we were going to fight over for the entire weekend. And we actually made handouts for each planet.
Yep.
That was posted
each of them was,
at each table.
Yeah, each of them was like a one page. It had like a piece of art on it, the title, a short like brief history of what it was like on the planet, who was holding it, and then like a couple of landmarks that might exist somewhere on the planet. They didn't have to be represented on the table, but they could be things that your army maybe interacted with as part of the plots. For instance, Hephaestus 12 has like, it's a hive world who is now currently controlled by orcs. So like all of the service level got bombarded by orcs and taken over by orcs, and they're like ripping all the scrap from the surface level up and destroyed the top parts of the hives. But they didn't go deep into the hives. So there's a bunch of hivers still in there. And there's a bunch of like hive gangs that still exist that no one's messed with. So it leaves some openings for some other stuff.
And we figured it would give people the freedom to make their own story, to take some swings, and to kind of like base their force somewhere. Because let's be honest, it could be a little hard to write your own force for the first time if you aren't of that mindset to kind of go ham.
Yeah, and part of it was also trying to create something that was generic enough that we could like tell a story in and like break stuff apart in. So like we don't want to fully describe out everything that's ever happened on this planet. Like no, like people still get to fight over it for reasons. Like, why are they fighting over it? Like, what is there to do here? And some of them were easier than others. Like, Bernar is now a former agri-world that is now ran and controlled by the Tau that are trying to defend it from all these outside forces. That writes itself. It's a defense mission. But you can't just have every planet be a defense mission. Like, what else is going on there?
Yeah.
What greater narrative can we tell here?
Because really, they're springboards to just have, like, greater connectivity between the factions. And some of our stuff, we got to admit, was off of a previous crusade that we had generated in end of 8th edition, early 9th edition, where a lot of these came from my requirement as a Tau player in that crusade to make randomly generated planets that I then had to try to take over. And Bernar ended up being a randomly generated planet that in a series of stellar defense missions that just like played out rapid fire with certain diplomatic objectives that were accomplished. I was able to like swing the planet my way rather markedly, and it was so memorable, and the fights were so much that we decided we'll pull that one in. And Belladonna 7 also existed there, but we never got to flesh it out fully, so we decided we take that one, pull it in, we'll give it more. And then the others, other people sort of freestyled off of to just add to the fun that we were all running with all weekend. And also made terrain for those tables.
Yeah, so each of the tables is made of terrain that we have. So we have an entire table of terrain for each of them. Each person sort of like made their own terrain. I made one that was like Orc Junkyard Mars Scrapyard sort of deal for an entire like planet. There's one that's just very imperial but swampy. There's one that's just an entire shrine world done. And yours was a big, huge Tau specific board. So lots of Tau, circular sorts of buildings, interesting, fun stuff. And then we ran with the normal like match play terrain layouts for these maps. Try not to like get too weird with it, though that may change in the future. We might just start getting wild with some of the narrative stuff. But we tried to keep as many of the rules of playing the game intact as possible so that we could get the story beats down first, and then in future events sort of start breaking it in weird ways that fit the narrative.
Yeah, we didn't want to take people too far out of their comfort zone off the rip, because a lot of the people we play with are normally matched play people. Like they just do essentially pickup games. And to try to get them into a narrative and ask them to tell stories is a little hard at first if you're like really nervous about your storytelling chops. And I felt like doing that plus taking a bunch of the basic match play assumptions and then ripping them up would just be so much that it would be uncomfortable for people, or might like hinder their want to really give some buy-in. So we just played it very safe. Flavorful tables, flavorful background fluff, flavorful planets, but normal core match play rules. And that was sort of our baseline. And then we began. Each person played 3 matches in a day. So like standard tournament stuff where you have one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. Those games ran longer than expected. Although, I'm going to be honest, the first one I expected to go real long.
Yeah, that was probably, I think, the thing that caused the most mayhem over the weekend. Was like, games ran long. And it wasn't just like one person had a long game or one matchup had like a long game. A lot of people just had really long first games, which made the rest of the games run longer. You're muted.
The others got faster as the day went on, I feel like, as people got more comfortable with their forces. But it was a rough start. Because a lot of people didn't get to play their demo games or anything. They didn't know their armies. They were playing new armies. So, like, I expected the first games to go a little long. I didn't expect that long, but I expected long. And then, for our setups, I think it's easier, by John's idea, if we just sort of take a story and we walk it through to show one person's experience of the day.
Yeah, so instead of trying to explain to you what each person had and what each table had, that's a lot. That's a lot to put in one episode. But we can sort of give you the vibe of what was sort of going on by taking one of us and sort of like walking through the whole day of what the narrative was. And sort of show you the progression that we're taking with each of these factions as they're going forward. Of like, this is how we're handling it, if you were to want to do something similar.
Yeah, so my day was spent playing Tau. I played my Tau on our last crusade thing that ended early, and I wanted to try to finish out their story, so I resurrected them so we could try to defend the planet that we took last time. Put them on the table, led by Commander Irontide, who is my custom name general we made for the last crusade. Defending the planet against what was going to be a bevy of horrific opponents. Because there's no shortage of weird, spiky space beings who want to torture our civilians. Why? Why?
Give me a fish cow, some little man. Blah, 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 blah.
I will give you nothing, good sir. Eat my plasma.
I'm gonna take you. I'm gonna take your fish.
Oh, we'll choke the chickens, all right. With plasma. So, game 1 was against Death Guard. My friend Corwin playing Death Guard, a force that he has had forever. He loves it. And the setup for this mission is that in discussions, Corwin's Death Guard is sort of contrasted to his previous army he was playing, which was the Night Lords, who are sort of impetuous, they're reactive, they're impulsive. Whereas his Death Guard are gardeners, first and foremost. Their goal is to view the entirety of the galaxy as nothing but a garden that is ripe for them to till and grow and tend to, and to create more life everywhere they go. And they're fine with doing this over a long scale. Their goals are broader in scope. So, after sort of talking through the general's headspace that he's running with, I sort of started to come up with an idea that they're not just trying to come here to take Tau planet stuff, right? Like, they don't need it. They don't want it. But instead, what the Tau are very good at compared to some of the other factions in the sector is that the Tau are very good at producing medical supplies. It is an agri-world that farms large, mutated, well, I should say genetically enhanced mushrooms, which leads to a lot of medicinal supplies that come out of there in addition to the food supplies. And for the Death Guard, this was a mission to corrupt. That we were creating the new batches to try to send out medical supplies as sort of minor bribes to make new friends in the sector, to reach new worlds in the sector, to try to make new friends, get new footholds, turn new planets, using
maybe even trade with some like rogue traders to get them to like maybe make more deals with you, even though you're Xenos.
Because let's be honest, compared to a lot of the other threats, like we're heretical, but we're really not your threat, and we could be useful to you way out here on the fringes where no one's coming to help you. If you need antibiotics, we have antibiotics. But if you're a Death Guard, that looks like an awfully ripe field you could sow. That if you were able to break into this medical facility through the airport that they bring all the supplies in and out of, and get into the labs, and corrupt these supplies, the chem vats that they're using to make these, you could subtly implant Nurgle's corruption in all of these supplies that are going to be going out throughout the sector. And it'll take you some time, but in doing that, in one battle, you've assured that over a long enough time span, you are going to infect planets of the species all over. And most of which will probably be Imperial because they know the lay of the land. So that was sort of the narrative, that he was trying to sneakily and intelligently infiltrate the planet, to attack us in a new way, to break into this large building that's a medical facility, helmed by his custom general, that is, I think, a Plague Lord, and then also backed by Mortarion himself, the father who came to assure that this was done. And that was all a little more nuanced, but from a Tau perspective, it's very simple. I have to push him off. Like, I have to get them out of here. Oh, dear God. We didn't know their goal, but we knew they had to die.
Like a Gray Line bus showed up full of dudes who don't wear deodorant. We got to get them out of it. We got to get them out.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Gotta go. Not allowed at the Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. Got to get rid of them.
Yeah, we actually decided that they were going to do their first infiltration, because he had a lot of poxwalkers, by plague bombing my buildings, which is why they're all rubbled up for the entirety of the day. Because he sent plague bombs in from atmosphere, which sent noxious spores and fumes out into some of our habitation district, and that infected some of our civilians and turned them into poxwalkers, which he then used to like bring out of the buildings and create a plague portal for everyone else to come through. Because the Tau would have had no idea how the hell to stop that, or that they even need to stop that.
Yeah, they have no frame of reference.
No, first time seeing Death Guard, absolutely ever, for Irontide and his crew. So, like, that was our setup for how they got past our defenses in orbit. They snuck through with this crazy magic. However, once they were on the ground, now we know what to do. Now it's guns and positioning. Let's fight. And we had a a cagey game at first on deployment. The Death Guard were a little hesitant to try to test the Tau guns. Unlike their Night Lord's brothers, they've seen what these can do. And they also did not underestimate the defenses. They came in knowing the Tau would respond in full force. So they came in, they tried to use the terrain to their advantage. They didn't advance up the ford too quickly. And that saved them a lot of damage. However, the Tau have home turf advantage. They know how to position around their own city blocks. They have the planetary scans. They've got the maps. And they were able to outmaneuver these Death Guard to find lines of shots. And it was a little touch and go. Our mission twist we pulled was unstable deep strikes, where like our Voxes were all jammed up, which we explained through all of the like plague spores and stuff in the air.
Right.
That like our sensoriums were just ruined. So we couldn't deep strike guaranteed. It was on like a 4-up. But luckily, Commander Irontide is an absolute beast and was able to make his 4-up deep strike to come in and start blowing up plague tanks. The Riptide absolutely got stuck in. Commander Monsoon, who was a pilot of a broadside squad in the last narrative, who has now been upgraded to commander for how well she did, also managed to like jump into the center of the force and start blasting people off the center of the table and to give everyone buffs and guide everyone shots. And we were able to stop them from getting into the medical facility. They managed to make it to the doors and onto the first floor, but the breachers then cleared that building like it was a John Wick scene. It was friggin' dope. And afterwards, the Death Guard decided to call a retreat, seeing that they were not going to get the job done and not wanting to waste too many lives. And Mortarion, being a spiteful, petty father and a terrible general, killed my warlord as a petulant child and went, "I won!" and then fled away into the warp, leaving all of his sons to then try to find a way out. Which is absolutely...
What a Mortarion move.
Yes, I've won. All you did was kill one guy. I won. God. Yeah. It was a Tau victory. We were able to hold them off from poisoning our supplies, and the Death Guard were able to beat a retreat because we aren't going to go off of our planet to go try to like run them down. And they also managed to retreat using fell magic, so I don't think we could have done so even if we wanted to. So that narrative left Bernard blasted, certainly hurt, but not dead. We stand. We are uncorrupted in terms of the hospital. We've also managed to turn on some of the air purifiers and cleanse the air so that we could actually see again. However, as we were trying to take stock of what sort of damage had been done, the planet is attacked again.
This time, it's not chaos. It's dark, dirty. No, I don't know if dirty is the right word. Dark Eldar. Like in their boats and their... sails and
pointy
web
elves.
Wave jumping.
These terrible pointy elves. It's another
needle guns.
It's another spiky spacefaring faction who like runs on our suffering.
But they're not chaos. These are just bad fellas.
They're Diet Slanesh.
That's a bold move. That's a bold.
I'm waiting for your rebuttal.
I don't play Dark Eldar or Slanesh, so I can't.
Because you don't have a rebuttal. You don't have a rebuttal. I'm right. Why are you booing me? I'm right. But yeah, we started getting...
But they don't paint pink. They paint black and green.
Do I need to point at Fabius Bile?
No.
Because the books are good. I will point at them. Yeah, we started getting pings on the radar that, a civilian populace center is being attacked as we were trying to take stock of what happened from this Death Guard invasion.
Is Irontide just loading a shotgun again? How many times do I have to teach you this, old man? Expecting Mortarion to be there.
I pictured that scene from Hot Fuzz when he's loading the shotgun in the deli. Just shame. Loading new plasma bolts. So whole squad jumped in the piranhas. All the battle suits took off to the air. We mobilized to the new area that was filled with civilians. And here, obviously, the narrative sort of wrote itself on a base level. They're here on a slave raid. The Drukhari are sort of desperate for supplies. they need more slaves to fulfill their sort of devotion to not be devoured by Slaanesh. And they were told, their general was told by Vect, the leader of all Drukhari. Vect, very trustful leader and man. Vect assured them this was a soft target.
He's the best Archon.
He's the best Archon. The Count's joke writes itself. But yes, Vect assured him that this was a soft target, an easy fight. So the Drukhari leader, the Archon, showed up to try to have a nice, easy raid, and he brought all of his anti-infantry projectile weapons, and then walked into a battle-suit-laden hellscape, and then proceeded to roll what was some of the most atrocious rolls I have ever seen in my wargaming career.
I didn't realize that there's a special rule on Dark Lances that say for every 6 of them you roll, you're only allowed to hit with 1 of them.
And it's gonna fail to wound. Like, I didn't know that was how those worked. I haven't fought them a lot. I was a little
No wonder they have a 40% win rate.
They probably have a 40% win rate because no one wants to play them. Because in one squad is like 32 guns. It was nuts. I've never seen someone work so hard to do absolutely nothing with a bajillion separate dice rolls with slightly different profiles.
You haven't played against Bajin Sealer Cult yet. Wait for that.
I mean, for the Drukhari, it was pretty apt. It was an exercise in masochism for Seth. Here are my 18 weapon profiles in my boat. I have to roll them all separately, one at a time. They all have different ranges as well. That's going to take me 15 minutes. I dealt 1 wound. It was rough. But also, they're here on a slave rave, so, like, to hell with them. And the running joke very quickly became that Vect set Seth's Archon up to fail. That the Archon had wanted to unseat Vect and replace him in Kamerga. And Vect found out about this, because of course he did, because that's his thing. And then from the shadows did everything he could to, like, Skeletor villain ruin Seth's game. Seth's Archon is, like, scrying the battlefield to see what he's going to be fighting. And where all of the battle suits are coming in from the east, Vect is just, like, off to the side with his hand over all of those runes. Just, nope, nothing to see here. It's fine. And then Seth...
Those aren't battle suits. Those are schmaltel schlutes.
They're simple transports, yes. And then Seth's boats get to the field and continually roll horrific charge rolls. I mean, failing 4-inch charges with rerolls. It's bad. So then I pictured Vect, like, in the cargo hold, disconnecting the fuel lines for all of these boats, twisting his mustache.
Going through a garage, cutting brake lines, just like...
No, the brakes worked great. That was the problem. It was all brakes, no gas.
Pouring gelatin into oil pans, like, just...
It very quickly became a hysterical story of absolute sabotage, as even my unit of anti-infantry shotguns blew up his big tank, his big boat, dead to Tal shotguns. It was hysterical, and by the end we were giggling like children, coming up with the various ways that Vect had ruined this Archon's day. And after taking a lot of casualties, the Archon decided to call it done and called the retreat with his one remaining boat that still had fuel lines connected. It was a strong Tau victory, which they really couldn't feel too proud of because they had no idea what the hell happened. It all started and ended so quickly that they gained no knowledge from this encounter. No knowledge. You know, just these weird spiky guys show up from the sky. They try to take our neighbors. We shoot at them, and they apparently are made of TNT that's liquid in their bloodstream, and all of them died instantaneously, and then they ran away without a word.
It's like being over-leveled and going back and doing like an old dungeon and WoW for a certain transmog. You just walk in and murder like 30 things, get your cool little sword stuff, and go home. You're like, I didn't learn anything. I don't understand that happened. I just came in, murdered, left, Oh no! Except for the Chikari showed up, we murdered them, and then they left.
It felt a lot like I'm playing Skyrim, and I've got my full Daedric set of plate mail on my orc with like my big two-handed axe that's got all the magic stuff on it. I'm leveled to the 9s, 99 everything, and the guard goes, "Stop, criminal scum!" And then gets wrecked instantly and runs away. Felt a lot like that, but they were the criminal scum. It was one hell of a game that we laughed at very, very hard. In the narrative is what saved it, if I'm being honest. What could have been a poopy time was just so fun.
But you went from a strong victory to then no longer defending your planet and going out.
Yeah.
And
so after 2 successful defenses, on top of all of the other narrative defenses that have been done in the history of Bernar, this planet we wrote, it seemed like now was a time that it was fairly stable for Commander Irontide, my commander. Essentially, our goal for the weekend was we were trying to hold out long enough for Farsight, like Commander Farsight, to reach us as reinforcements, to help us defend this planet, because we are isolated, we're cut off, there's way too many threats. And we were seeing if I lost my games, if we would lose the planet of Bernar, and it would burn. But, would we lose it before my friend Brian's Farsight got here to reinforce us, or not? And after two successful defenses, it wasn't burning.
And also on his side, he did 2 successful offenses, where he fought the Necrons in one and then fought World Eaters in one, and was able to make his way to Brenar. So it just made sense for him to swap, and for Brian and Farsight to now do a defense mission on Brenar, and then for Irontide to then be the aggressor.
Yeah.
While Farsight was rearming and re-preparing and sort of getting some rest time, Irontide can now take the fight to the enemy, and use diplomacy at the end of a shotgun.
Yes. We decided we were going to strike out to try to make a new foothold in this sector, because we have had a lot of success in converting Imperial worlds to the greater good. They're a place where people are treated really terribly, with long work hours, with very few rights, with limited medical care, with just a horrible quality of life, and people like that have a lot of needs, and if you could fulfill them, it could make you some friends. So we decided we were going to strike out to the Sisters of Battle Fortress world, where they rule with an iron fist, and kill everything that looks vaguely heretical. And by heretical, I mean asking simple questions. And we thought it would be a great place to go, shake some hands, kiss some babies, hand out some medical supplies that we defended earlier in the day that were thankfully uncorrupted. Maybe hand out some informational pamphlets about the greater good. And as we were doing this civil service, the Sororitas decided that they absolutely couldn't allow this. And we got into a holler brawl at the end of the night, where the Tau were facing off against the bastioned Sisters of Battle Army. And for me, this was the closest fight of the day. This one went long, really long. It was a very touch and go game. Pretty much everything Morganval touched, I could not do anything about. It just obliterated off the table. Like Morganval with a group of Nundums, it was point click dead. So my strategy was to just like, okay, that is a crazy thing. I'm just going to try to kill all of their other anti-vehicle stuff so that I can win the objective game. So Irontide did a bunch of crazy positioning and some deep strikes, and we were able to pop all of the Sisters of Battle heavy armor tanks in one fell swoop on my turn to buy us a little bit of room from what would have been a huge punch to the mouth by the Sisters. My opponent actually felt bad. They're like, oh, it could end up being a really swingy game. But nope, not with Irontide on the table. And we managed to, claw our way back in and then start to win on points. And by the time the Sisters, in their wrathful vengeance, realized that their bloodthirst had pulled them off of the objectives and way behind in points, it was too late. Our pamphlets were handed out, our medical supplies were given, everyone was infected with our little ideology, and we weren't there to raise the planet or take it. However, we've planted a seed, which may come up later. And after successfully repelling their defense forces and handing out all the supplies, Commander Irontide packed up and went back home, because Farsight had to defend Burnar, the planet that we've done all of this fighting for, and he failed. He failed. Farsight turns out a very angry, outgoing man, not really suited for defense missions, turns out. On the attack, an absolute hoss. On the defense, not ready.
In his defense, everything else that attacked Bernard were mostly just like crazed, weird psychopaths. And then this last group was highly organized, structured, collectivist military that just showed up and just shot them to pieces.
Yeah, it was guns on guns. It was a bloody fight over there. But alas, Farsight could not hold. Burnar was sacked. Not fully taken, but sacked, which will damage us quite a bit, and sort of put it on the back foot if we didn't respond in some way. And that was where the narrative of the night ended. That was like the end of the third game. Which is sort of representative of like how we view this, that your army is going to have a run through your 3 games that's going to determine your story. And then we started looking at it sort of in hindsight as a wrap-up of, okay, what does this mean for these 2 Tau factions and their planet subsequently? And looking at it from Irontide's perspective and Farsight's perspective, Irontide does not believe that Farsight could be trusted to defend Burnar. You know, he leaves, and the moment he does, it burns. You know, Farsight is too hot-headed. He's meant for expansion. He's not meant for defense. And to ensure that the planet is safe, Irontide is going to bastion the defenses at Burnar. He's going to hold it, and he has an undefeated record on holds especially. So, narratively, what that means is as long as he's bastioning the defenses, and unless something happens in the greater narrative as a whole, Burnar will be safe from attacks in the next narrative we do. It's just way too held, it's way too secure, no one's going to risk it, they know it's too dangerous. But that will leave the remaining Tau player on his own outside of Burnar trying to expand with Farsight and the 8 to push out onto other planets and to try to get new footholds so that we're not just staying in one place. He's trying to grow. Will he be able to pull it off? Will he be able to do it on his own? I don't know, but I want to find out. And I think that's kind of the fun of this whole thing for me, is getting to tell like a collective story with my friends and kind of set up a pitch for the next one.
Yeah, and like we did more out there. I mean, for instance, like I did World Eaters, and I built a different list for each game. Well, specifically, I built 2 different lists. One was a list that did not use Angron. And in order for me to bring out the Angron list, I had to kill 8 units. So until I had killed 8 units throughout the game, I could not bring Angron. And so, like, my first game, I didn't quite get to 8, so I had to bring the same list again as I was trying to kill enough, get enough blood on the same planet to, like,
bring the big show
as Angron. Yeah, and so I eventually got there, and so for the third game, I had Angron show up, and the other Sisters player came with the Demonic Incursion, you know, coming out, and Angron shows up and fights Angron, killing Angron in a fight, and like has this really cool moment. And now, because the World Eaters lost 3 games in a row, I've decided to slink away into the shadows while their Lord goes back to the warp and recharges. And there was already a little bit of sneaky written in the lore for some of these different planets about a weird underlying cult throughout.
I'm sure that has no relevance. This is fun.
And that is how I'm going to bring in Gene Stealer cult into the narrative. So, like, to sort of sum this up, like, we told these super cool stories all weekend, and now we are both writing, like, big and small stories around the different things that happened, the different battles that happened. And not all of them have, like, the same level of depth or detail, but they all had at least something to work off of that we can use it to push forward. And some people are switching factions because of narrative reasons. Some people are switching factions because they just aren't feeling the one they were playing, or it's hard for them to get in the mindset of. But we're just going to roll with it and just write more lore for these and sort of get more people invested. We actually had some people showed up and like watched and were very, very into what we were doing and want to come to the next ones. So
which is great. It truly, like, I didn't expect our group to have so much fun. If I'm being honest, I thought it would go worse in some ways, because narrative is just sort of, it's orthogonal to the way a lot of matched play games are played. But if anything, people had a blast, and they want to get more narrative, more weird, more story-based. And yeah, there were people who were watching who at the start of the day, like, one of the shop owners was, like, reading one of the table things. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. I could maybe play that at some point. And then read every table lore synopsis and all of the background lore as we were playing and went, I want in by the end of the day. Because he just wants narrative stuff. So we might be able to actually expand to more players. It wasn't perfect. There are some improvements we could do, and we're definitely going to do. That's for sure.
There's some improvements we want to make, like mechanically. Like, we want to get weird with it. We want to add weird, unique mechanics. You can only really do a narrative. You can't really do a match play.
Yeah. The key is everyone has to be, like, down to clown for getting weird in outside of match play. And even when we break match play, I think we will go light at first, because, again, it could be a lot if you do too much. But giving various playlists some light rules to enhance their fluff might be a good place to start, especially if the Gene Stealer cults go nuts. Maybe we add some fluff and some rules there. You know, we could do better with logistics around, like, food stuff and timing. Also, in the future, we're going to really, really encourage our players to play practice games so they're not playing their armies for the first time at the event. I think that will help us a lot to have just a smoother experience. And then most people were quite involved and into the narrative, but, like, when you have a big group of get-together like this, not everyone is going to be as willing to, like, give input as other people, whether it's just not their thing, or they're not comfortable, you know, a multitude of reasons. But some people aren't going to have the same level of buy-in and effort to try to, like, tell a story. And there were one or two games that, like, after the fact, the fluff for that battle, from what I was told, was essentially like, yeah, like, you're here for my stuff, or I'm here for your stuff, and that's about all. And sort of thinking about that and what to do about it, I think instead of trying to, like, do, like, a weird punitive punishment thing for this War Barbies group storytelling session, I'm just going to look at these and fix them on the back end. You know, I can, as someone who's writing some of the story write-up, I can maybe add some hidden depth to some of those missions that maybe they had more at stake than even one of the parties knew.
Yeah, there was a secret agenda going on that they didn't know was happening.
And now it opens up whole new story chapters for that player who didn't, you know, necessarily feel like they got the coolest of stories at that point. And, like, you can just fix it retroactively. So why, like, go through instead hit people with the bonk bat? You know, stuff like that we could certainly improve on. We could try to make a space where people are more willing to give more buy-in, where they're willing to get more weird, where they're willing to try to tell more of their own story with us and to add more. But I would rather have it be an opt-in thing rather than, like, a forced-in thing. And that I feel strong about still. Like, I just think these War Dolly games are about getting people together to have a good time with your friends. And if you get, like, weird and punitive with it, it just, like, ruins the very core fundamental thing that I love about this hobby so much. And I don't want that. I just don't want it. So yeah, big improvements, though. Really big improvements. But running it at the shop was nice. Way more tables than at my house.
Yeah, and I think that's the way we're going to do it in the future. We're currently about elbow deep in planning the next one, which is going to be happening relatively soon. We asked if everyone wanted to stay in 40K or try a different game for the next, like, big get-together, and everyone screamed 40K. So here we go, writing again.
40K, back to back. Just as I'm not done writing, I gotta start again.
Yeah, I'm going to see if all the write-ups survived in my bag. We'll find out.
I got some of them off the tables, so we should be good there, which is helpful. I have to get a whole new army together. I'm going to pitch over to the Onion Knights. It's an idea I've had running in my head for way too long that I wasn't going to bring, because I'm like, oh, no one wants to play against Knights. Like, they're weird. People have bad experiences. And then people wanted more weird big fights, so I'm like, oh, to hell with it. We're doing Knights. Like, I'm going to tell a crazy story.
Yeah, I mean, we're even thinking about switching to some different, like, mission styles. Like, one of the ideas that we've kicked around is the idea of, like, taking the secondary missions like the new secret missions or the gambits, right? Or like these things, like just as an example, you have the Leviathan deck and then you have the new Pariah Nexus deck, and assigning a deck to a table. And so you, over the course of the weekend, might end up playing Leviathan on one table, Pariah Nexus on the other. You might end up playing in a mission where your secret missions are picked for you from the Pariah Nexus deck, and now you get to flip them over and see what it is, and you're like, oh, that's weird. How am I going to do that? Just like weird stuff like that, where like you have interesting little like wrenches thrown into your plan, and you can't exactly plan for, which is fun for a narrative game. Even maybe including some like AI running models, where like you might run into like cultists or
not literal AI,
sealers,
but like pre-genned responses for like neutral enemies.
Like if you get within 3 inches of this terrain piece, a like unit will pop up within the terrain piece at the end of each person's turn. It moves so many inches and then tries to charge or shoots or does a thing to the nearest enemy unit.
Or maybe it's a sniper who pops up and like tries to shoot one of your characters every turn. Like
the nearest character, like boom,
stuff like that. Just to add a little more twist, get a little more weird. But again, not too ham, not yet. Gotta have a little restraint. Overall, though, I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, especially with the terrain. Next time around, though, I won't have to make that whole terrain board. It's already done. So I'm hoping I can just spend more time actually writing and building the army itself, which I think will just make for a less stressful experience going into the weekend, which is cool. And maybe leave some time for me to get more practice games in, which I would love.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway. Is more practice games kind of have to happen.
For people out there, though, like this is the thing I want to know. Because we were going to do this episode no matter what. I'm going to be honest. Sorry, listener. We didn't know if anybody
didn't like it. I'm sorry.
We didn't know if anyone would like this, but we have heard that at least one or two folks wanted to hear more about these little events we ran. So we wanted to make this for ourselves and for that small group. For y'all out there, is this interesting? You know, if we do another Joe HammerCon like this, that's a narrative, do you want another episode talking about what happened, the breakdown? Do you want more episodes about how to run a narrative run a narrative game day like this in the pitfalls? Are you just interested in the base concepts of narrative as a whole? You know, like this is a frontier I don't hear people talk about very often online. It's almost always dominated by like match play, pseudo competitive conversations. And I think that's because like the competitive community is very passionate and therefore make a lot of stuff on podcasts and YouTube videos, which I totally respect. They're really putting in the work. But it does mean that I hear far less about people wanting to hear narrative topics. So if y'all do want them, please shout them out. We'd be more than willing to do more. Just kind of got to know if it's actually a vibe people want or, other options. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, other than that, it's the normal, like, subscribe, comment, do the stuff that tells the algorithm that we're here and, like, gets people to watch us. That's really helpful. And for all of you who have come here recently, welcome. And we're going to keep making stuff about all sorts of different games, talking about our unique way of looking at these games. If there's stuff that you have to tell us, whether it's criticisms, comments, concerns, yada, drop it all down there. Let us know. We're very engaged with all of you. And to be honest, we have seen a lot more people talking to us over the last, 6 months to a year. And it's been very fun, very cool, from all over the place. It's great.
Quite the understatement, John. Quite the understatement. It's been a friggin' delight.
It is an absolute delight. Sometimes there's a lot.
Trying our best. For now, though, we're going to keep doing what we can. And that's been all of our opinions, bona fide, and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.